Many of you know about the story that I tell that years ago, a client asked me at the end of a session, what is it that I think every person on this planet is trying to accomplish? And from a soul level. And I said to her, to find our truth and keep it. That was my first answer. That was my immediate answer. And so being someone who's done mental health work for as long as I have, I know that the biggest challenge that we have is trying to figure out who we are. So finding our truth and keeping it is not only, I think, that mission that everybody is on as a human, but also it's that whole idea of authenticity. And so I want to talk a little bit about authenticity today. This word was thrown around quite a bit about 20 years ago. There were several books that came out that helped a person really kind of get to know themselves a little bit more. And I want to talk about this because, we spend a lifetime trying to get to know who we are. And yet at the same time, we are changing all the time. So how is it that we can become authentic when the next thing we know, we're changing a value, we're changing a perspective, we're changing an idea about something, we're changing a need, we're changing a value. So how is it that we can keep up with ourselves when we are trying to be authentic? Because, with my soul health model, I talk about the fact that when we are in alignment, that is when we feel the best. But if we were constantly changing, if we are constantly trying to figure out, okay, what is the next chapter of our development? What is the next chapter of our evolution? How is it that we get there, that we can actually find authenticity? So I tell people that authenticity is kind of like a moving target. And yet that's not a bad thing because here's another little story I'm going to tell you about a client situation I had years ago. Actually, I've had a number of clients, but this particular one was a male client and he came in and he says, well, I know who I am. That's not what this is about. But he was only like in his mid 40s. And so my thought was, interesting, because whenever someone says, I know who I am, either they're really not that interested in learning and growing because okay, this is all I'm about. I'm not going to grow anymore, and that's kind of a nearsighted way of going at our human development and our soul's development. But the other thing that I thought with him is, wow, isn't he in for a big surprise? Because number one, therapy changes you, soul healing changes you. And so it's one of those things where it was just kind of a really clear reminder of the fact that authenticity is a moving target, but the more we get to know ourselves, the more we can start to weed out what doesn't fit. So I want to say something about another story that I tell people, and this was way before I knew the story of the David statue for the Michelangelo, work of art, basically. But I used to tell clients, when they would come in wanting to figure out who they were or what it was that was keeping them from getting where they needed to be, a lot of times what I would tell them is from a soul's perspective, we have to clear out what doesn't fit. And then we start to figure out who we are. So, in other words, a lot of times I will tell people we have to go at it from what seemingly is backwards. We have to go at our development. And in my case, I talk about the soul health model. And the soul health model has those 10 branches of the human condition. I created that on purpose as a roadmap to help people understand themselves. But it also serves as a roadmap to clean out what doesn't fit. So, going through each aspect of your life, the physical, the psychological, the social, the interpersonal, the environmental, the financial, and then, keep it going down that path of figuring out each branch. The best way to align with yourself is to figure out what does not fit. That will help you be more authentic. And for whatever reason this week, I've had so many clients coming in and they're kind of not doing the human condition. They're not humaning. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not adulting. They're not really doing what it is that is going to help them get where they want to be, or even to cope necessarily. And the thing I've had to be pretty direct about is the idea that if you don't do the human condition, your soul will not evolve. And if you are not aware that you are here to evolve as a soul, you're probably also not going to be taking care of the human condition. So, this is why I say the human condition and the soul condition work in tandem to not only help you be healthy, but also help you understand that you are here to evolve. You're here to outgrow those old patterns, those old values, those old things that didn't really fit for you or that you thought they fit, but they just don't fit for you now. If we don't work in tandem with our soul, we're not going to get there. And so the only way, the only road that takes you to authenticity is to continually be aware of where you are in the moment, knowing that the next moment might change a perspective. It might change you from an emotional perspective. Maybe something is going to open up inside of you because of a difficult situation or a tragedy. You did not know that about yourself before that event. Maybe something wonderful and beautiful is going to happen and that changes you. Same thing. You don't know who you're going to be until after those kinds of situations happen. You don't know who you're going to be after a tough grieving situation of a loved one. You don't know how you're going to be when you go through school. And I was telling a client just this morning, this whole idea of, I was lucky enough to know at age 14 or 15 that I knew I was supposed to be a psychologist. What I didn't know is how many twists and turns I would take to get to where I am. And even today, I might have an idea of where I'm supposed to go. I'm supposed to be teaching this stuff to others. I'm supposed to be helping other health practitioners and professionals and coaches understand all of the aspects of the soul so that they can help others. I know that. What I don't know is how that's going to happen. I have an idea in my mind of how that's going to happen, but 2 years from now, I can guarantee you it will look different than my vision for today. So when I talk about authenticity with a person, it's tightening up bit by bit, branch by branch, or I should say branchlet, or maybe even leaf by leaf on those branches of your tree to figure out who am I? What is it that I'm about? What is it that I know for the rest of my life that I'm going to be about? And I'm going to give you an example of this. When I was a kid, I grew up in southern Colorado. We did not have that many trees around us. Colorado, the area that I was in was very prairie-ish. And in fact, our yard was rocked. We did not have grass. I don't think, I'm trying to think if anybody, there were only a few houses on our block that even had grass because it was so dry there and arid there that grass didn't grow very easily. And so when I moved, I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy trees. I didn't know how much I was going to enjoy green because all I knew was what I grew up with. And I lived in that area till I was 23 years old when I moved away to grad school. And then I moved into a very lush part of the country, green everywhere. And yes, we did have winters there, but just green. And then when I moved here to North Carolina, it is green almost year round in one way or another. We have bushes and trees here that stay green all year. My grass in my yard stays green most of the year, little speckled here and there, but it's warm enough here to keep it green. And I love the lush green. I didn't know that about myself when I was before 23 years old, basically. The same thing is true with trees. I love trees. I didn't have trees around to know that I loved them until I moved near them, and I adore trees. And so that is something that has stayed with me for over 20 some years is that I always have leaves around me, leaf art, or you can see on my walls, I have tree art. I wear tree necklaces and tree jewelry. I have books about trees. I will always adore trees. That is not something that is going to change. So, as we get to know our souls, as we get to know our human condition, we can align with ourselves. And when I say that, I really call it aligning with spirit for radiant living. But when I say aligning with spirit, it means that we are connecting in with ourselves to find our truth in the bigger dimensions, basically, and that will carry along with us from this time forward. So trees will never change for me. Dogs will never change for me. Nice sunny weather will never change for me. There are certain things that will never change, and yet there are certain things that I'm like, huh, wow, I wonder if I'm always going to like this. The color purple. So just another example. When I was probably sixth or seventh grade, I became just enamored with purple. I loved purple. When my dad allowed me to redo my room, I got lilac walls and purple carpet. I had purple bedspreads. I had all of this purple around me. Now that has not changed except for the fact that I've added teal or that turquoise color. Those are the colors that really do it for me. Is basically I'm all about these colors. My website too, I love that kind of green tree-ish. If you look at my website, I've got trees all over it. So what I'm saying is that from start to finish, part of our job as a soul in its development and its evolution is to get to know itself more and more and more, layer by layer by layer. And that is how we evolve. We evolve along with our ability to become authentic, which is why I also end up talking with clients a lot about this. And it shows up in so many different ways. Today, I was talking with a person about the fact that whenever he's talking about something, he gets a lump right here, and and we talked about it to the extent that he could never speak his truth as a child. He had so much going on in his childhood that basically he could not really articulate, could not speak his truth. And probably from a throat chakra perspective, he probably had to swallow a lot as well, swallow a whole lot that he could never really talk to his family members about. So we've got that aspect. We have the layers of us that, we go down a path of thinking, oh, I'm supposed to be in this kind of career, and then we get in that career and we hate it. But it's because that is supposed to lead us to the next level of experiences so we can get to know ourselves better. So even those terrible experiences, whether it's a relationship or a job or moving to a place that you think you're going to love and then you don't love it, whatever it might be, if you're drawn to that, you think you're going to really love something or be aligned with something, and then you turn out not to, it is in your soul's path to help you understand yourself even more, even if it means it's like, wow, okay, that was wrong. I need to do something different. This is how we try things on for size. This is how we become authentic to ourselves. This is how we get to know ourselves. And I joke about this that the only phrase or quote from any of the things I've written that I remember verbatim is the words, to know your souls, to know true health. Only then can you reach radiant living. And that is what this is all about. Knowing your soul, knowing yourself at such an clear level that there's just no wavering. There's no point in even redirecting your ideas, because it's like, no, this is who I am. But until we experience something, until I call it the seal is cracked, until we crack that seal to understanding something different, until we are exposed to something or experience something, we may not know we even like it. So, for another example, when I was in graduate school, I grew up in Southern Colorado. We did not have Indian food around us. We did not have a whole lot of ethnic food other than Mexican food, which I adore and love, always will. But a lot of my friends in graduate school loved Indian food, and one of my colleagues in the graduate program was Indian, and so a few of us would go to this Indian restaurant in the little downtown area, and I didn't know what to eat. I didn't know, gosh, what is this? How do I order? And over time, well, actually, let me say this first. The first time I tasted it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the thing. This is what I needed. This is what I wanted. And that aromatic blending of flavors is just amazing for me. And it was one of those things where then I started to try different meals and Indian meals. And then I tried this and I tried that. And then it became one of my go-tos when I was really stressed. A lot of times, what I wanted were those aromatic, soul soothing kinds of flavors. And now I adore Indian food. And, that was how old am I? That was 23 years ago that I was exposed to Indian food. And frankly, I love it. I could eat it every week. And in fact, I've taken a couple Indian cooking classes now, so I can make it, because it's an involved cuisine basically, because you definitely have to blend flavors. You can't do something quickly. So it's one of those things that, again, it's an evolution for me to have been inoculated or brought into the Indian food world. Same thing with Thai food, same thing with Ethiopian food, same thing with, Greek food. I mean, we didn't have any of that when I was growing up. And so I've tasted a lot of these cuisines and have figured out what it is that I love, what it is that really kind of feeds my soul and aligns with who I am. And I've actually moved away from American food. I don't love American food. If I have the chance for ethnic food, I'm going to have ethnic food. So, as we age, as we grow, as we are exposed to things, as we experience life, it is all about savoring and getting to know who we are. It is about that authenticity. It's about learning who we are layer by layer, branch by branch, so that we can get to know who it is that lies under this skin suit, as they call it, and what it is that our soul's here to learn and evolve into. and what it is here to evolve out of. So even though authenticity is a moving target, and even though that, we can work, work, work to get to know ourselves and then something changes, it's still part of getting to know ourselves. So when I talk about the soul's evolution, I'm really talking about this whole idea of getting to know yourself at such a deep level that you can kind of weed out the things that no longer fit. You can weed out the kinds of relationship dynamics or the relationships themselves, the kind of people you do or don't want to hang out with, the career path you want to take. I can't tell you the number of people that I've helped get out of a tradition that they had thought they were supposed to go into, some sort of schooling, and but they ended up hating it. And then once we got them aligned with what they're supposed to do, they are just loving life. What about the stay-at-home moms that are like, oh gosh, I wish I had something else? And then once we find it is what it is that they're supposed to be doing, they love it. Or what about people who never wanted to work? It didn't feel right, but then they didn't have the opportunity. But once they had the space after retirement to really get to know who they were, whether it's through crafts or hobbies or travel or whatever, then it's when they felt aligned. So this whole idea of aligning with spirit for radiant living, aligning with our own souls, basically for radiant living as well. It is about our soul's evolution, but it's a process that takes a lot of time. So the client that I mentioned earlier, the male client, I had a conversation with him a couple of weeks ago, and I'm a Sagittarian. I can be very direct. I don't mean to be mean. I can be direct. But he was talking about the fact that, yeah, oh gosh, I don't have people that I hang out with. I don't get people in my life, or I don't seem to have these people that I can really connect with and that I can really tell everything to and who really understand who I am. And he went on about, he wanted people to be able to see and hear him. And he kept saying, I want people to understand me. I want people to understand me. And I finally said, you don't understand you. How is it that you're going to find the people who understand you if you don't understand you yet? And he very quickly said, wow, that was blunt. And I said, well, but think about it. We are going to attract people into our lives according to who we think we are at that time. But if we are growing and changing, we're going to either outgrow that person, or if we don't know who we are, we're going to let someone else define us. We are going to let someone else lead the way, and then we're not going to be happy anyway. So he understood what I was talking about, and he's kind of embarked on a more self-discovery path along the way anyway. But that's why I think the human condition is so challenging, because we have so many things that try to take us off our center, so many things that distract us, so many things that pull us away from who we are. And it starts with our parents. Sometimes our parents think they know better for who we are, but until we find out what that is, we may not have an idea of how to really feel happy, how to feel aligned with ourselves. I think that's where a lot of depression and anxiety comes from, is that we're trying to live outside of ourselves to please others, but we're really not doing that soul searching to figure out who we are. What about society? How much does society tell us who we should be? Whether it's, as a female or a male, what are the roles? Or whether it's the part of the country we live in. So there are cultural, regional kinds of ideas and intentions about who the outside world thinks we should be. So we have that. We have religion. We have just world event kinds of things. Okay, how are we supposed to handle these world events? What about countries? Countries have identities. So that's the other thing. What if you're brought up in a country that the values may or may not really fit with you? What do you do with that? What if the values of the country changes? Right now, not every, but a lot of countries around the world are going through identity crises, including our own, because what we were just 2 or 3 years ago is not what we are today. And so a lot of people are very discomforted by this. And so this is such an important part of our evolution, is to start to look at, wow, what am I? Who am I? Who do I want to be from that authentic place? And can I live in the current situation and still be authentic? Now, I think that is like the billion-dollar question, is can we live in a current situation and still be authentic? Because depending on the situation, we might feel like we can't be in our truth. We may be in a situation we can't really be authentic. So whether it's sexuality, whether it is a gender role, maybe you're a more assertive female and yet you live in a part of the country that you feel like, or in a family that has to be quiet. Political parties right now, good Lord, that's throwing stuff up on the walls right there is how is it that we can be around people that we have different values with? Can we be in our truth? The pandemic brought this up for a lot of people. Within the first month or two of the pandemic, families were fighting because of the fact that some wanted to wear masks and some didn't. We had all of this stuff happening. But I can't help but believe that this is for the sake of our soul's evolution. I can't help but think that this is part of the growth and the kind of cracking those seals for us to get to know ourselves in such a way that basically we don't get self-righteous about it, but we get self-loving about it to say, this is who I am, take it or leave it. Now, I will say, and I've said this a number of times, I never feel like I fit in. I didn't really feel like I fit in my family. I was always thinking deeper. Now, I wish I had known my father before he passed. And what I mean by that is that he was a deep thinker. He was a soulful thinker, but he didn't really share it with anybody. And he had some things he wrote that I didn't know he wrote until after he passed. I'm like, wow, he was a deep person. I would have loved to have had these conversations with him. My mom, not so much. She didn't really want to go there. She couldn't go there. But it was one of those things where, it's like, wow. I wonder how alone he must have felt because he could not share that with anybody in the family. Now, again, I was too young. He was 21, or I was 21 when he passed. And so, part of it is I wish, that's part of what I grieve about him not being here is I so wish I could have those conversations with him. Now I can in spirit, and he and I do have energetically some conversations about kind of what his beliefs were and things like that. I can still tune in. That's the blessing of doing intuitive work and doing some mediumship work. I can still have some of that energy, but as a human, gosh, I wish he was here right now because I wish we could have some of these conversations. So the whole thing is, what are the events that have happened in your life? What are the experiences? What are the things that have seasoned you or traumatized you or worn you out or whatever that are actually here to help you get to know yourself more? I cannot tell you the number of people who said, whoa, that really tragic event, whatever it might be, was what opened me up. That's what caused my spiritual awakening. Well, that's when they get on this fast track to get to know themselves. So, our soul's evolution is all related to getting to know ourselves at that deep level. So to me, this idea of authenticity is another part of kind of embracing that word and really looking at that from, gosh, what is the authentic part of me? Who am I in this aspect of my life? Who was I 10 years ago? And how has that changed? And how has that helped me get to know myself and live that authenticity even more? How have I embraced who I am even more? And I think this is it. Now, I'm going to joke with one more thing before I go here. One other thing I learned about myself is that when I was going through a major event, a major transition, whether it was starting graduate school or leaving my marriage or whatever it was, I realized, and I've seen this in other women, that I would cut my hair. I would cut it really short. And luckily I can get away with short hair, but I would cut my hair. And part of it was I didn't realize I was trying to shed everything that didn't fit anymore. But I also wanted simplicity at those times. When you're going through major changes, you don't want that much to mess with. And so I started realizing that I was chopping my hair off literally when I was going through a major kind of thing. And part of it was like, okay, that was like shedding a skin. That was getting to know myself even more. But what's interesting now is that I know myself enough to know, even if I'm going through a major transition, I actually feel more like me with long hair. Now, like I said, I can get away with short hair, but somehow my face can frame it, that it helps. But I don't feel like myself unless I have long hair. So, no matter if it's up on a clip or a ponytail or whatever, I'm going to have long hair probably as long as I can, just because it feels like more who I am. Other people chop their hair off. My best friend, man, her hair is getting shorter and shorter again. And she feels more like herself. So we have so much to explore to figure out who we are from that authentic part of who we are. But again, it's part of our soul's evolution. It's part of getting to know ourselves. It's part of really understanding who we are in every little nook and cranny of the idea of a tree, every leaf, every branchlet, every branch, the part of the trunk. So who are we? And anybody who says that they know who they are at a young age, I always question because of the fact that that means that either you're done growing or you're not open to understanding that this is part of your evolution. So play with this whole idea. Do that kind of internal inventory or this life scan of, wow, how have I changed? How have I gotten to know myself? How have I become more authentic along the way so that I can understand what my soul's path was? That just helps you kind of look back and solidify, kind of hard set those changes and help you realize, wow, I want to keep discovering. And this is it, is we are here to discover ourselves throughout all of our life and lifetimes. But with the current lifetime, we are here to become more and more authentic, even if it means all the way up into that last breath that we are breathing authentically until we take that last breath. So just want to throw this out there because, a lot of people constantly struggle to find themselves, but I want to emphasize the fact that we're supposed to constantly struggle to find ourselves. This is part of our growth. This is part of our evolution. This is part of really solidifying our soul's journey, is to understand that this is really the human condition, is being able to figure out who we are. That is how the human condition and the soul condition work in tandem to help with our soul's development. Think about this. I would love to hear your comments. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I know you're going to be pondering this. Bye bye.